Yes, they can.
Okay. Are you ready to start?
Say again.
Are you ready to start?
I'm ready to start anytime. Yeah.
Okay. When were you born? When and where were you born?
I don't know what you said.
What year? And
When and where were you born?
Oh, you were talking into that. That's the reason I said. I was born May the 2nd, 1934 in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia.
What did you remember about your early childhood?
My early childhood, I remember, actually the first time I remember is my second sister was born. She was born in 1937. I remember exactly where she was born and, and what she cried most of the time anyway. That's what I remember. That's the first I remember of being alive.
What was the occupation of your mother and father?
Well, my father was a fisherman, or he went out to sea most of the time. And in fact, it's during the war that he sailed from New York and Baltimore all the way through to St. John's, Newfoundland, and taking war supplies over there. My mother, she actually did a lot of housework outside because we were poor in those days, and actually she was a stay-at-home mom, and she had 8 children, by the way, and a dog and 2 cats.
Describe the house that you grew up in.
We grew up in a little old house right down in Barnard Street in Yarmouth, and it had 2 bedrooms upstairs, and what was the front room downstairs was turned into a bedroom, and we had quite a large living room and a kitchen. And in that house there was 2 stoves, one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and they burnt wood and coal. We had coal brought in from Cape Breton, and the glass, in fact I said this before, the windows were single pane glass, and it was cold all the time. We were always cold all during the winter time. I can always remember that. And other than that, it was just an old house.
you had the inside toilet.
Oh yes, by the way, down in the Greenfield here, they all had outhouses or outside toilets. In Yarmouth, we had cold running water, no hot water, because we didn't have electricity and we didn't have a phone until 1947. And there was actually cold water, and that cold water, well, that's all we had. And we did have a flush toilet, though.
What was it like during the holidays?
What was it like during the holidays? Well, Christmas holidays was probably the best because we always had a Christmas tree, and the Christmas tree was actually put up and trimmed on Christmas Eve. And the tree stayed up for a whole week, and on that Christmas tree they always had popcorn balls, and we always wanted to take the tree down around New Year's time because of the actually you could always get a popcorn ball. But as far as holidays go in the summertime, I used to work, and when I was only 12 or 13, I worked every day, for pay, and I did all types of work, and mostly delivered groceries on my bicycle, and also had a paper route, and did most of this during the holidays.
What were your usual meals?
The usual meals? Well, we had oatmeal or whatever for breakfast, and for lunch, my gosh, I can't remember so much. We had either soup or chowder or something, and or sandwiches. And for for suppers, we had mostly in those days we had fish, a lot of fish, and hamburger or beefsteak or liver, but anything that was cheap. The cheaper the better. If it was cheap, we got a lot of it. If it wasn't, we didn't get so much.
What were your jobs around the house?
My jobs around the house, I did almost nothing really. My poor mother, she had all these kids, but we didn't think we should have to work around the house. But I did cut some kindling wood and whatever, and dried it in the oven so she'd have wood for the next morning to make a fire. Because Dad wasn't home most of the time; he was either out to sea or fishing, whatever. But anyway, I had very little to do around the house.
How did you spend your free time?
I didn't quite get your question.
Free time. How did you spend your free time?
My free time? Well, actually, the free time, we went to school as everyone did for, from September through to June. And the free time after school and whatever, we played ball. We played all kinds of sports like, kick the can and all this stuff. See, nothing was organized back in those days, but if you were going to play anything, you did it on your own. And we had no protection like helmets and whatever as they do today. And my free time was, well, mostly playing sports.
What was your schooling like?
School, well, with school in Yarmouth, that was down in the south end part of Yarmouth. It was a large school. We had 2 grade 1s, 2 grade 2s, 2 grade 3s, 2 grade 4s, and 1, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And from there we went on to high school, and the high school was 9, 10, 11, and 12. And you know, in our schools back, in fact, from grade 1 to 4, there was two grades of each, and we had up to 35 or 40 students in each one. But I'll tell you one thing about the school. We didn't have electricity in the school, no hot water, no electricity until 1947. And if the fog was too thick in Yarmouth, they canceled school. And but by the way, we used to, when we went to high school and whatever, we used to have to walk a mile each way, and we had to go home. We had an hour and a half for lunch, and had to go home to eat your lunch and go back again because we couldn't afford to pack a lunch and take it that way.
What is the first car that you remember liking?
My first
Car that you remember liking?
A car.
a car?
Yes.
Oh, I had when I was 17. I had an old car, an old Dodge car, and that was a 1942 car, and it was, well, I liked that one actually, but it was an old cheap old thing that you buy. I probably bought it for $20, $25, and that's one I liked. But one I got now is a good one. It's a Kia Sportage. So anyway.
Did you have a radio or television?
No. Back when I was growing up, we had a battery radio, and a battery radio, there was a battery that was bigger than a car battery that ran this radio, and we used to listen to the stations from the States, or one CJLS was local in Yarmouth, and we could always listen to that and whatever, but when the battery ran down, we couldn't afford to buy a new one, so we had to wait till we got enough money to buy another one, but we didn't have electricity, and right in the town where I was born, we had no electricity until 1947. So, you know, don't know you'd have to have a powered radio, and they didn't come in down our way until 1947, after everyone was sure they had electricity, and no television, by the way, until 1953 or 54 down there.
What is your favorite kind of music?
My favorite kind of music, I like country and western.
When did you get married and how old were you?
Well, I was 25 years old and got married on October 3rd, 1959 to Shirley, who you've already talked to. She was 28, and you know, that was here in Greenfield.
When did you start a family?
We started a family. The fact is, we were married in October. I tell you, it's a big joke with me. We were married in October, and our first son was born in January, but a year later. So we were married in 1959, and Stephen was born January the 4th, 1961.
Did you play any sports?
I played all kinds of sports in Yarmouth. I played senior baseball, and I played basketball and rugby football.
Was life easier or harder when you were younger? Was life easier or harder when you were younger?
Was your life easier or harder when you were younger?
Well, I tell you, my life in Yarmouth, you'd classify today as very, very hard, but I thought it was great. We didn't know any better. So I would say that our life was good.
Who were your heroes or role models?
World matters. Well, I remember my brother was born on September the 1st, 1939. And that's the first I remember of world matters, because Hitler invaded Poland that same day, and then the war broke out. And that same week, I went to school. That was my first time going to school, and I went to school in grade 1. So I'll go back a couple of years. In 1937-38, we attended kindergarten, as they called it, and kindergarten took the place of what you now have as primary. So we had no primary. We went to kindergarten, then we went to grade 1. So anyway, that's what I remember about the world matters way back then. Then during the war, we had war, and There was an Army base and an Air Force base. We had aircraft coming over all the time. And they were Tony's drones, and they were going out just off just over the ocean. And these planes used to practice shooting at these drones in order to get their skills. They were called the Fleet Air Arm. They were actually people from England, English airmen. So,
What was your favorite meal?
my favorite meal actually is prime rib roast, if you could get it, or lobster.
What were the big news stories that you remember?
The big news story, as I repeated before, the first one I remember, I was only 5, but they were talking about it when my brother was born. The doctor was there. In fact, we were all born at home, so they came down to the house to deliver my brother, and they were talking about this war, where Hitler invaded Poland, and they were afraid we were going to have a real world war, which we did have.
Who was the first prime minister that you remember?
My first prime minister that I remember was, John Diefenbaker. John Diefenbaker became prime minister, I believe, back in 1956, something like that. I remember him quite well.
Do you have any friends that you've had since childhood?
Well, I tell you, no, I don't, because they're all dead, most of them. Most of my friends died at age 70, 71, 72, and I'm 85, so they've been dead, most of them quite a while. There's probably still some alive, but I don't know where they might be.
What do you remember about your grandparents?
My grandparents, well, I tell you, my grandmother, she was born in a place called Plimpton Station, and she and my mother came to Yarmouth back in 1918, and my grandfather and grandmother Adams, that's on my father's side, they were born and brought up and married in Digby, and they came to Yarmouth in 1920. But they were, my grandmother Adams and grandfather Adams, they were almost like second parents to us, because they were up at our house all the time, and we were down at their place. We lived on the same street.
If you could change one thing in the world, what would that be?
If I could change one thing in the world? Well, I don't know. There's so many things that you could change, but I guess you'd call it just peace on earth. We'd have, instead of all the turmoil we have in the world, we just have peace with everybody.
How has the world changed in your lifetime?
Well, I tell you, if you could look back in the history books sometime, as you get old enough to look them over, we were born in the 30s, and we didn't have, in fact, even the airplanes that we see now, they were an oddity to see them. And they've gone from, well, just small aircraft, and now they fly all over the world, and before they couldn't. And the whole world itself has changed. Everything has changed. I mean, today, regardless of your status in life, whether you're poor or rich or middle class, you have all the opportunities in the world. Back when we were there, we had very few opportunities to do anything. So it all has changed, and I would say not for the better, to tell you the truth.
What year do you know exactly what year did your parents got married?
My parents were married in, I guess it was in January 1931.
Do you have any advice for young people today?
Well, I can tell you one thing for advice for young people today. You know, when I was growing up, you respected your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, your minister, or priest, whatever, and also the older people. When I say older people, older to you, whether they be in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. But I find today that there's very little respect for anybody. People just don't respect anybody anymore.
And that's all for the interview. Thank you for doing the interview with me.
Well, you're quite welcome.